As we head into a new year, it is now more important than ever to discuss the topics and utilize the tools that will move our Jewish community forward.
We're still connected.
Time to say goodbye to 2020.
Groups that we share the same values with.
Experiencing on your own terms.
Connecting through Judaism.
You show up because this matters.
You feel a part of something.
A series of inspiring events leveraging the leadership of Bay Area community builders, philanthropists, rabbis, academics, and professionals. People just like us who are working to make our local communities safe, equitable, and resilient.
Look, it has been close to a year since this pandemic started. All of us, the whole planet, is feeling the pain of this, and I think in particular in this neighborhood, that weight is more heavy than it's ever been. We are situated here on Ella Street, right in front of Glide. I would say in the big picture, the neighborhood is, in some levels, it does not feel majorly different. On other levels, it feels like a ghost town because that normal hubbub of outsiders who walk through here have disappeared. And the many people who live here on the streets or rely on Glide don't have those privileges of shelter or work. And so we see them and we see the added layer of the weight of COVID. None of us really know what this disease is. We know how pretty much to keep ourselves safe. And a lot of us who have jobs that we can do from home, we're doing them from home. Workers who would usually flood office buildings within blocks of here are gone, and they are not in the neighborhood and not walking past people and not getting proximate to the challenges of this neighborhood. When I walk into the neighborhood and I actually see what is happening and I actually see the immeasurable pain, the deep racial inequities, it shatters my heart. On one level, I throw my hands up. On another level, I am like, let's get to work. Let's summon that power to moral responsibility. It is our time. This is our work. Let us step into it together. Morning. Yeah. Yeah. Morning. 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 This is my friend Paris here. We've known each other many years. He usually holds court here on Ella Street. Kind of the master of the street on many levels. Always playing some good music.
Just so
Yeah. Life during COVID, is it majorly different for you?
It made me lonely feeling.
You feel lonely?
I live by myself.
Yeah.
So I don't get out with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then when I do,
yeah.
I remember the 6 feet thing.
Yes.
I don't want to get no.
No, we don't want. We like you a lot. Wonderful. My name's Michael. What's your name?
Nathaniel.
Nathaniel. Nice to meet you. Give you an elbow, Nathaniel.
Yeah, give me some.
You live close by?
I do.
Awesome.
Right here.
How long have you been?
I'm lucky enough to live in a room.
In the Tenderloin, like during COVID. How is your life similar? How is it radically different now? Besides the mask?
It's crazily enough, it's been sort of similar because I was extremely lonely before.
Yeah.
And I've been real lonely since. I've heard people say this, look, dude, if you can survive the Tenderloin, this virus ain't gonna kill you, which is a kind of a funny way to look at it. I will say this though.
Yeah.
The way people live in this neighborhood, what I find astonishing, nobody in my building is dying of the virus.
Yeah.
You know what they're dying of? Fentanyl.
Yeah.
We had 3 in 1 week.
Yeah.
2019, almost 40 people in my building died. That's insane.
It is insane.
All fentanyl. Fentanyl,
Yeah.
fentanyl.
A
So
lot of
nobody's dying of the goddamn virus in my neighborhood. It's fentanyl.
Yeah. Look, there's all kinds of challenges people are facing, and as I said, on the street, we see them in public. So you see people who are missing shelter, or don't have a place to use the bathroom, don't have a place to gather with their friends, are hungry and are in need of food, are wrestling with addiction, sometimes publicly, and sometimes coming to Glide to get clean needles and to use safely. I think really in the big picture what we are seeing is just the remnants of trauma of people on the street at Glide. We talk about trauma-informed care, and we want to think about the trauma that someone went through last night and a decade ago and 30 years ago, to think about the pathway that got them to this challenging place, and think about how we might show up, certainly with hot food and tangible love, but also how might we build out systems that help them heal from those old wounds. You know, I think I mentioned that 4% of San Franciscans are roughly African American, but close to 40% of our unsheltered people are. So, you know, I find it intense and painful, but to look head on at the idea of one of the few places you can reliably find African Americans in San Francisco is on the streets of the Tenderloin in poverty. So I bring in kids from Jewish day schools and summer camps. You know, pre-COVID, they were coming in every couple weeks. Often, what I would often do is sing with them the Friday evening Kiddush, and they all learned it for their bar and bat mitzvahs. And every Friday night around Shabbat dinner tables around the world, we sing this line, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. You should remember that we came out of Egypt. We should remember that we came out of slavery. What is the word for Egypt? Mitzrayim. The middle of Mitzrayim is this word tsar, which means a narrow or a squeezed place. Remember that when we were slaves, we were squeezed, and God, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, took the Jewish people out of slavery. It's the Jewish people were born in slavery. When I think about Glide clients and what we saw out on the street, I can think of no one in this town who's being squeezed more than the people on these streets. The Ellis Street in the Tenderloin is a modern day Mitzrayim, right? We who were created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of a God who with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm freed the Jewish people from slavery. I think with the mighty Jewish hands in this town and outstretched arms and the power that we have, we should think with the greatest courage and act with great moral courage to say this is our time. Look, I think our people, the Jewish people, have experienced greater safety, greater power, moral power, financial power than we ever have in all of our history. And I think we feel that in this town. We have built amazing institutions, amazing synagogues, amazing foundations, amazing summer camps. I want to know what is like the moral moonshot of the Jewish people at this stage in America. How might we use the crazy power that we have to leave a serious imprint on the racial justice landscape? How might we say that we're here and we, just like we remember that we were slaves in Egypt every Friday night at our Shabbat tables, Mitzrayim, how might we think about people who are being squeezed in our town and use our power to be less like Pharaoh and more like God?
Wow. Okay. What I think is the moral moonshot. What is our moral moonshot? That was incredibly powerful. And I, along with my co-chair, Lily Cantor, we felt it was so important because everybody is disaggregated right now. We're in our homes, either here in the Bay Area or somewhere else, and we have safety, and we are in the minority. And this is our backyard. And, you know, I quote Dr. Cornel West when I think about, you know, when you think about love in the public sphere, you think about justice. And so we brought together our friends, Rabbi Michael Lezak, who leads the social justice team at Glide, Isoke Femi, who, as I love to say, she is the Maven of Transformational Learning at Glide, and Judy Young, who leads the Women's Center and is the executive director of UCSF's National Center of Excellence in Women's Health. And last year, Judy and Isoke and Michael took a pilgrimage along with the community at Glide and the community at the Kitchen and leaders from UCSF, not just here in the Bay, but they went all the way to Alabama. And they had an extraordinary moment of reckoning in walking the walk and going through history. and having history connect to our past, connecting to our present. And Judy, I know you in particular went on a journey there, and I wonder if you would have the privilege to share that with us.
Yes, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for including me in this conversation, and just taking a moment to just breathe in and reflect on that powerful video that we just saw of our brothers and sisters in the Tenderloin. So I think that was just want to take a moment to breathe that in. There's so much that we saw in that video, and just need to take a moment to acknowledge the power of that. The journey to Alabama was also incredible. You know, there's so many of us that do a lot of racial justice work, and that's really the fabric of the work that I do at UCSF at the National Center of Excellence in Women's Health, and also leading this Black Women's Health and Livelihood Initiative. And I focus so much of my work on racial justice. So going to Alabama with Rabbi Lezak and Isoke Femi was just an opportunity for me to dig deeper and to learn more about the history of you know, all of the racial injustice that's happened in this country, and you know, just my own lived experience, the history that I've learned from my parents, and then there's so much that I haven't learned. You know, you can intellectualize some of this experience, but going, you know, as Rabbi Michael talked so much to us about it, gives us a chance to sort of tear open our souls in a different way. There was just an opportunity to deepen that impact. And I had two relatives who were lynched many years ago, and I knew of their stories and hadn't shared with many people their stories. And so being able to go and learn about their stories and learn about this history, and feel the soil in Alabama, feel the history in Alabama, was just so different. And so going to Alabama and hearing from people who, you know, we go to hear about our trauma, but we also go to hear about our resilience. And so there is this synchronity between this harmony between our trauma and our resilience that speaks to us in such a powerful way. And I wrote a story about this experience that I will encourage all of you to read and hear and listen to, that speaks to us about going to visit the National Monument and hearing from my ancestors and learning from them, and getting to experience, getting to understand a deeper understanding of not articulating this very well, but getting to have them speak to me in such a deeper way. You know, when you go to the places where the soils of where ancestors have been, and you open up your heart in a different way to those lived experiences, to the trauma that has happened. And you also hear from stories of powerful people who have lived. We you know, walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We spoke to women who walked on freedom walk, marched in freedom walks. So I have the stories of trauma and the stories of resilience, and through those experiences, my heart opened up in a different way. My soul opened up in a different way. And over the course of those several days of being in Alabama, I saw and I felt my ancestors every single day in a way that I hadn't ever before. And by the time on the fourth day of our journey, we got to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice and saw these steel pillars that represent states and counties of all of the people who were lynched. And I was there looking for the names of my ancestors who were lynched on those days, and many years ago. I have two ancestors, Sim Garnett and Henry Corbin, who were lynched. There was just something so incredible about that experience. The ancestors spoke to me in so many different ways, and I felt the vibrations of my ancestors speaking to me. As I started walking onto that property, the vibrations of those ancestors were filling my spirit and calling to me. And I felt them surrounding me, protecting me, guiding me, and giving me courage, giving me energy, giving me spirit. And I came out of that experience, I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know really what it was. And I came out of that experience with a different calling. I came out of that experience affirmed in a way that said, here's my calling, my purpose. I knew before that I was already working toward racial justice, but I had a different affirming after that to really work harder towards racial justice. And it was a calling. And so I came out of that with such a deeper appreciation for my work and my own power. And it was going back that called me forward in such a more powerful way.
I feel that so deeply. It reminds me of my experience the first time I went to Yad Vashem. And it's, as Michael says, it just rips your soul open. And this is our soil. This is our backyard. This is our responsibility. And so Isoke, we're building a bridge now from Montgomery, right into the bay, right into our backyard. And I wonder if you could sort of take us on that walk and talk about, what's happening here, and help us have a deeper understanding, so that we can rise and support in more embedded ways.
It's a tall order because I think that what I really want to ask our human community of privilege to do is what I need to do in this moment, which is to start with the personal. Like, that video is with me. How do you do something like this? How do you stay genuine when you're deeply affected? Our training is to run right over the top of how we're affected and go right back into that intellect, which we've made king. We've made intellect king. There's a place for intellect. But the heart, the soul have been marginalized, pushed to the curb, kicked to the curb, as my people would say. And I'm looking at that video and I hear spirit say, you don't see the light. You don't see me in your people. You don't see me in your brothers and sisters. You don't see me. Like, if I could see God in my brothers and sisters, there's no way I would allow that to happen, to be that way. I just, oh. I mean, one of the things that really hit some of us who grew up in San Francisco when we went to Alabama the first time was that actually there was less degradation, open, obvious degradation, at least in the cities, like in Montgomery or in Birmingham, than we see on the streets of San Francisco, where Black people fled horrible conditions trying to get somewhere safer. And we were shocked that, that people in the South weren't doing worse. You know what I mean? Like, that's what the myth we were raised with, was that we left that place in search of something. more dignified, more just where you could be calmer. You could bring your skills and your abilities out. You know, you felt, I think when I think about Misraim, we felt like we were leaving Misraim. And we, in some ways did, but in some ways did not, because the face of oppression here in the North, you know, or outside of the South is different. It refuses to acknowledge itself. In the South, there's just more honesty about it. So I know I'm rambling a bit, but this is what, in a sense, I'm calling us to do, to stop protecting ourselves from having our hearts broken. You see, like you walk and you see, you know, through the eyes of the camera that was following Rabbi Michael. And if you haven't, you know, if you haven't covered your heart up too much, you feel something. But right away, the training is to shoot that up into the mind, into the brain, and start intellectualizing about it, to distance from the actual emotional experience. And so part of what we do on the pilgrimage is try to create the space so that people don't have to do that. Like, okay, we went to the museum. Let's go back now and debrief. Let's go back and be together in a safe space where we can feel our feelings. Now, some would say, well, what's the point of that? That's navel gazing. That's, you know, whatever they might call it. But I'll tell you what, I think that part of what got Black folks through the most horrific parts of enslavement and post-slavery Jim Crow were these practices that we brought here from Africa. Practices where we could be in our bodies, we could shout, we could moan, you know, we could call down the spirit. You know, that's what you do. When you sing, when you praise, when you cry out to God, you are bringing down the spirit. It's not an empty gesture. So we learned how to do that, and we brought it, we fine-tuned that on this soil. We fine-tuned it because we had nothing else. We didn't have our names. We didn't have property. We didn't have any of the things that most free people are allowed to have. So we had to dig deep into the spiritual well and come up with practices that would help us to survive that madness. So to me, to honor Black people, part of the process is like refine your feelings. Refined, not refine. Refined your raw emotional response to what we've allowed to happen. Not in a way that just has us hanging our head in guilt. We may feel guilt in the beginning, but ultimately it's not a guilt game. Guilt won't get us out of this. But if you let your heart be broken and you really feel it, it connects you. So in this moment, I'm connected to the people I saw. I'm connected more to myself. I'm connected more to my creator, who says, did you not see me? Did you not see me? I mean, I grew up in San Francisco, so some of those people, I'm sure, are people who, you know, their grandparents and their, you know, they knew my family probably. So we have to allow ourselves to feel the sorrow. I know it's embarrassing. I know it's excruciating. I can't even imagine what people might be feeling as they watch me now have a reaction. But I don't care. I don't care. This is something I'm happy to do in service to all our liberation. We all need liberating. And part of what we need to liberate is this ability to feel. We've been told since elementary school, don't be emotional, be rational. No one's going to listen to you if you're crying. No one's going to listen to you if you're sounding hysterical, which is, by the way, anti-feminine. But I say, no, let's bring back the feminine. Let's bring back our ability to feel when we see our beloved humans suffering. Let's bring back our ability to feel it.
Well, we feel it. And, you know, we're unpacking generations of trauma, but we're also bringing it right back into the now and into the immediate needs of the wellness and the safety of this community. And so from your perspective, and yours, Judy, and yours, Michael, what can we do in the immediate, in the now, to address the wellness and the safety of our larger community?
I would unpack the words wellness and safety. And I quote Brian Stevenson regularly, who founded the Equal Justice Initiative, who was one of my great justice heroes. And in his TED Talk, he talks about 4 points of getting proximate, the need to get super close to people and how that changes us, the capacity to imagine new narratives, 3, to hold on to hope with all we've got. And the last one is to do uncomfortable things. When I bring people into Glide, I say to them, I never want you to feel unsafe, but I do want you to be uncomfortable. But I think sometimes we hide behind our safety as a way to protect our heart from being shattered. And I think if we really opened up our eyes, if we really opened up our hearts and souls and watched that video, or really know what's happening in our town, it would crush us. It would, to think that a human being, a child of God, created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God, does not have a safe, dignified place to use a restroom, to lay their head at night, in a town with this much wealth, with this much creativity, that we have not been able to solve. That like flabbergasts me. I can't believe, like, I want to let the heart shatter. I want to encourage hearts to be shattered. And then I want to go from that place of broken hearts to summon outrage and to summon our creativity and our power to think about how we, and I'm speaking to the Jewish people and to those running with the Jews, might bring our own personal collective story of remembering being shattered, and to think about how we might use our power now. I think about the great projects that we have built as a people. Most recently, thinking about Birthright. We send hundreds of thousands of kids to Israel every summer, right? And how we hope that inspires them to be connected to our ancient homeland. What might it be like for the Jewish people to take on a building project, to build housing for African Americans in San Francisco? That we don't even put our name on it. We don't need the ego investment to be able to say quietly to our kids and to our grandkids. You see all those people on the streets of the Tenderloin? Like, you see those people in these history books? We house them. We didn't do it for ego. We did it because we have power and we remember where we came from. My dad, who died 16 years ago, looked at me. The central story of his life was, don't ever forget where you came from. And when I walk the streets of the Tenderloin, I definitely meet unsheltered Jews wrestling with mental illness and addiction on the streets of the Tenderloin. But when I see the broad community on the streets of the Tenderloin, I think, like, my people came from this. My people came from narrow squeeze places, and I'm not there now. I feel safe. I feel secure, but I feel radically uncomfortable looking at this. And I want to build out a practice, and I want to invite those who are with us to build out a practice to be uncomfortable regularly. And I'm glad to think about how that happens. Call me when this is done. I will gladly take you on a walking tour of the Tenderloin tomorrow morning. Right?
So when we think about that, because we need to walk that walk virtually here, and then physically when we can, Judy, as a community leader, as somebody who not only leads the Women's Health Center at UCSF, but also very embedded in Black women's studies and doing that work every day. On this call, we have community leaders, we have philanthropists, we have members. People are showing up here because they want to be led. It's not about us leading. It's like we want to be led. And so can you give us, from your perspective, some suggestions of things we can do now?
Absolutely. And I agree with Rabbi Michael. I think being uncomfortable is an important place. And I think looking to where you have power to make a difference. And so whether it's looking around you and where is it that you have power and privilege, and where can you make a difference? And so what are your resources? I'm trying to make structural difference. And so it's where can I make structural change? So where do you have power and resources? Where do you have energy? Where do you have financial resources? Where do you have networking resources? And how can you contribute that to making a difference? And in what ways? And can you contribute? Where can you contribute? Where can you open up doors? Is it going to be for work in the Tenderloin? Is it going to be work for Black women and the movement for Black women's lives? We certainly can use support in our initiative. The Tenderloin Glide needs resources. Thinking very intentionally about where you can support your resources to open up doors for people to get resources. If you have resources to contribute those resources. There are areas that need structural change. All of these systems that are responsible for people being on the street, responsible for the disparities that we see in people's lives, they were not set up, they were intentionally set up. So we need to change the systems. The systems need to change. We need to break the systems. And so we need help in changing the systems. We need to change the structures. If you are in a position of power, how can you look at the power that you're in and look around you on the boards that you're sitting at? Are they diverse? Do they have people of color? Are there underrepresented minorities sitting on the boards that you're at? How do you fix that? How do you fix the systems that you're at? And how do you make your resources matter? So those are the questions to ask. There are many of us that are doing that work that can help with that. So reach out and ask for help if you don't know how to do that help. There are many books to look at, but there are many of us that are doing this work that can help and lend help to you. And the resources matter. Dollars matter, insight matters, networking matters. We need doors opened. There are lots of ways that doors are closed. My voice can only go so far, and we need doors opened. And many of us on this call need doors opened so that we can, our voices and our work can go further. And it's not just in my work, but it's in all of our work.
It's in all of our work.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
In all of our work.
We need all of us to move forward. Thank you.
100%. Every day we have to walk that walk with you. Isoke, do you want to build on that in terms of like immediate things that can be done and to guide that from your perspective?
Well, people probably have figured out at this point that we talk about in our work, Glide offers a program called New Bridges. So for people who want to have a container, a community, a learning community within which to explore these ideas without fear of making mistake. This is huge. This is huge. People are paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. So if you want a place, I would encourage you to contact the Center for Social Justice at Glide and get on the list for our class called New Bridges. New Bridges is an opportunity to come together with like-minded people who want to develop their justice muscle, which is not just an external muscle, it is an internal muscle. We are weak inside and we need shoring up. We need to be able to get stronger internally, yeah? So we talk about two pillars. We talk about oppression as being upheld by two pillars. On the one side are the structures, the institutions, the socializing agencies in our world, the courts, the hospitals, the schools, etc., the political structures, organizations. And on the other side is the internal, the pieces where we've internalized those structures. We are the guardians of those structures unwittingly. That is the piece. That's another piece that has to come down in order for oppression to come down. So my work focuses on that pillar, on the pillar that deals with where are you internally still carrying beliefs about Black people that get in the way of you being an activist. Because I don't care how much people knock at your door for this, for you to work on this side. If you haven't done the work of acknowledging that there's just something you've been trained to feel or not feel when you see Black skin. It isn't that you're a bad person. This has been going on for a very, very long time. The denigration of Blackness, anyway, the work that I focus on is the pillar that involves the inner work. And if you have the stamina and the resources to focus on the organizational, institutional side, the structural side that Judy's talking about, opening doors, changing policy, by all means, that's necessary and needed. But we as a people will have to eventually focus on how we've internalized anti-Black belief. That is what, when we see, and the reason I know this is because I have internalized it. So people who don't look like me can argue all day long that they haven't. It doesn't get through to me because I know they have, because I have. I know that I've been trained to look at white skin and have softer feelings than when I look at Black skin. That's the training. So we need to address this. It's painful, it's scary, but we need to address it. So that's the two pillars. The other thing I wanted to say is that I want to address something that Rabbi Michael said about doing the work. There is a structure and accountability process that people can look at and dig deeply into that has 4 steps to it. The first step is to acknowledge the harm that's been done and that is continuing to be done. This goes for any form of oppression, whether it's about sexism or racism or anti-Semitism or homophobia or any of the isms. Acknowledge the harm. The second step then is to make an apology. The third step is to make amends where possible, right? To do reparation. And Michael has thought about this a lot in terms of just what's happened to Black people with the loss of wealth in San Francisco. That was done deliberately and systematically. So making reparations. And then the last step is to make a commitment to the future. So what would it mean for us to say that by 10 years from now, the number of Black and brown men who are in prison that's the number of Black and brown people who are going to be graduating from our universities. We make that commitment. We just set a goal, right? Like I say it all the time. I heard someone asked the head of NASA or whatever, what's it going to take to get a man to the moon? And the person who was in charge at the time said, the will to do it.
With the will to do it, Rabbi Michael, when I think about your own journey from being a rabbi and having bar mitzvahed both of my children, and those silent prayers that you made on the bima, if this is our virtual bima for all, bring us onto that bima and tell us, guide us, help us lift not only from the menschhood of the children that you have walked through, but the allyship that we are also keen to engage and to rise. So this is our bima. Bring us home.
Thanks, Tina.
I'm thinking so deeply about Isoke's invitation of ways for us to think deeply about how to bring systemic change to ourselves and our families and to society. And she and I've talked for years about this Jewish notion of teshuvah, of making amends, and being one of the most potent forces in the universe. And I build out this group that comes to Alabama, and we bring increasing groups of power. We brought 25 senior leaders from UCSF, like Judy and many others this year, because we want to think, what would an American teshuvah project for slavery look like? How might we heal these festering wounds that continue to plague us to this day? I would say my blessing for all of us here is to summon the courage to open our eyes and open our hearts and let the true stories of what is happening probably less than a mile from you on your streets right now to shatter your heart, to think about the through line from slave ships to slavery, to mass incarceration, to mass poverty of people of color in our town, to think, I can't believe that this is happening. But then to imagine, I always regularly think about Psalm 147, which describes God as Harofeh l'shivui lev. The God is the source that heals broken hearts. There's nothing more holy than I can think about than this healing work to do on individual levels, on family levels. Isoke pushing us to think about how might we heal our institutions? And Judy, might we bring more people of color into power and think about our opportunities to fold them in? And really, how might we heal the collective broken heart of America that I think is really hurting these days? I think this is the work of our time. I think this is the invitation that is waiting for us. I think there's nothing we could be more proud of than looking to our kids and grandkids and to say, like, look at the work that we have done. So I think that now is the time.
I always say, and you taught me this, that we hold our life in balance, right? So the universe was created exclusively for me, and I am but a speck of sand in the universe. And so it is time to understand where we are in that balance and how to rise.
Amen. I could not think of a better invitation for this time. Just coming out of an incredibly powerful talk with Isoke Femi, Glide's Maven for Transformative Learning, Judy Young, who runs the Center for Excellence in Women's Health at UCSF, and Tina Sharkey, a dear friend and amazing leader in our town, thinking about systemic racism and how we might bring our hearts and souls to that. And now we have the privilege to learn from and hear from the great mayor of our town, Mayor London Breed.
Hi, I'm Joy Sisiski, Chief Philanthropy Officer at the Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund. And I have the great honor today to introduce our special guest. Friends, this is Mayor London Breed, the mayor of the city and county of San Francisco. Welcome, Mayor, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Joy. It is a pleasure to be here.
As a San Francisco native, how does that inform your leadership in San Francisco, particularly in the work that you do with our city's most vulnerable populations?
Well, I grew up in public housing in the city and lived there for over 20 years of my life. My mother grew up in the same public housing development. My grandmother raised me there, and we lived in the midst of poverty. My grandmother received welfare for us. We had food stamps. We struggled. And I think part of living in that and living that way, you wonder, why is it happening to me? But also, why is it happening to everybody that I care about, that I'm growing up in my neighborhood with? And so when I became older, I started to get more active and get more involved in the political world because I wanted to change that. And I never thought I would be mayor, which is absolutely incredible. But how I grew up and my experiences of standing in food lines and being uncomfortable with our financial status in my family and the crime and the violence and the poverty and the uncertainty and all of those experiences from my family and my community, I use those experiences with how I make decisions as a mayor.
I'm wondering, how do you think about creating deep, lasting social change to positively impact these root problems of these issues?
Well, that's a little bit more, of course, complex and really a challenging issue. I think that what you saw in 2020, in addition to the challenges with COVID, you saw this racial uprising. Like, people were, finally, as outraged as African Americans have always been over the issues that have sadly impacted a large African American community throughout this country. With the murder of George Floyd, it was like people's eyes were, finally open to something that I think people didn't necessarily look at it in that way before. And it forced us all to watch and to have the hard conversations, even with our children, even with kids, to say, Mommy, why did that happen? And to have to explain to young kids that it's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. And I think that the reason why, what we're going to have to be able to do moving forward is to make sure that we're creating a new generation of young people who are compassionate people, who care about serving the community, who know that what happens to my brother or my sister, and not just my family member, it impacts all of us. When George Floyd's family suffers over the loss of his life, we all hurt as a community. We all can feel that pain. And so we are all more connected than we know. And I think rooting out, the hatred and the divisiveness and all of those things, is something that is an ongoing effort, and it's something we can never give up on. Part of it is the initiatives we put forward, the programs we support, the things that we do in our everyday lives, how we treat one another, how we set an example, how we become actively engaged. We can't necessarily control the behavior of others, as you can see, sadly, with what happened at our Capitol, and at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. It was very heartbreaking and sad that so many Americans in this country feel emboldened to do something like they did, where people have actually lost their lives. We can't control everyone's behavior, but the question is, what are we going to do to reflect a better society? What are we going to do to not force someone to feel the way we do, but to help people to understand why it's important that we treat one another with respect despite our differences, that we learn how to be on this earth together as sisters, as brothers, and not be so combative and negative and hateful and divisive. Those are the kinds of things that really tear us apart. So, we have a lot of work to do there. And I think what I've tried to do as mayor is really focus on equity, focus on equitable policies, focus on having the hard conversations that make people feel uncomfortable. And that's how you get to a better place. You got to let people express themselves, but be willing to be open-minded about a possible change that's going to make things better for all of us. Because if we continue down this path, as you can see, again, something that happened at the Capitol, nothing we ever thought would happen in our lifetimes. I mean, this is 2021, and something like that could actually happen. It's almost unbelievable.
What's so wonderful about what you said, and where we share a lot of similar work, is in being driven by our values. And some of the Jewish values that guide our work here at the Federation are around, and I don't want to speak for Michael, but I know that they're guiding principles in Judaism around kihila, which in English means community, tzedek, which is justice, and tikkun olam, which is healing the world. And what is our responsibility to do that, and in all ways? And I think it's a good time for me also to share just a little bit about our work, and then ask you a question about it. And you touched on it in an earlier response. The Jewish Federation and Endowment Fund has been open. Not all of our employees are going to work, but it is an essential business because we are providing really critical grants and direct assistance to some of the people who need it most during the COVID crisis. A lot of our work has focused on providing loans, no interest loans through our partner at Hebrew Free Loan, scholarships, direct food assistance, help with job loss. And this past year, the Federation and our donor advisors have given away close to $200 million to thousands of nonprofits, most of which are in the Bay Area. So a lot of people today who are on this call have been exceptionally generous, and they continue to be. Our year-over-year grant making increase this year. I think people really want to help, and they want to help not just during the COVID crisis, but they want to be responsive to the social issues in our community and our nation. So, you know, you touched on a few of these, and I love some of the ideas that you suggested people are doing, but what more can we do to support, you know, the most vulnerable in our community here in the Bay Area, people of color, other marginalized people that are suffering disproportionately? And, you know, where are the areas that you think that we can make a difference collectively and individually?
Well, first of all, thank you for your contributions. I know that that is not just money that came to San Francisco, but to the entire Bay Area. And what a difference. You know, the money that you raise, that you contribute, what a difference it makes. And when we talk about investments, I think, you know, just looking at what's happening in San Francisco and the challenges that exist around poverty. And one of the things that we are looking at is how do we make sure that money is not the barrier to success? And so I use that as an example because I think about my own life, right? And I grew up in poverty and I'm mayor. How did that happen, right? And on the other end, I have a brother who grew up in the same house with my grandmother who raised him, and he's incarcerated. What's the difference here? And, you know, there were not a lot of opportunities, but there were some. And I was fortunate enough to get a paid internship when I was a teenager, which is why I started this program called Opportunities for All, so that every teenager in San Francisco who wants a paid internship can get one, because I never want money to be an obstacle. My brother, on the other hand, did a lot of illegal things growing up that landed him in and out of juvenile hall. And it was really hard because, again, we were poor, and he did what he felt he needed to do to generate money to be able to not only take care of himself, but to help my grandmother and to help me and to help the family. But it wasn't the right way, but it was the only way that we were familiar with in our neighborhoods. And other than being lucky enough to get another opportunity, I don't know where I'd be. And so I think part of, you know, our responsibility is to make sure that we make it difficult for people to choose the wrong path. We invest in opportunities that can work to help change someone's life. And that's just not about the financial contributions. That's also about giving of ourselves. It's also about making a commitment to Glide, for example, and to be actively engaged, because so many people walk through the doors of Glide one day and they say, I want to change my life. And then all of a sudden, Glide is there for them, and Glide is their family. And Glide is wrapping their arms around them, trying to help them get on the right path. So when you think about it, because you see people who are poor, wealthy, in between, and everything else at Glide worshiping together, supporting and uplifting one another, and not judging people, even though it's a very difficult environment to be in on a regular basis. But at the end of the day, that's what we need. People who are committed to real change, committed to investing themselves into various situations that will uplift people, because that's what's going to turn things around. It's why I never say no to Glide, you know, because of what they do.
Thank you. I think, you know, you heard it here. It's to show up and to be there for each other as people, because that's what we are first and foremost. Thank you so much. And not just for taking the time to be with us today, but to have a real conversation with us and to share some personal stuff about your own upbringing and how that's informed your leadership. It's really important for us to understand what we can do. And I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy, so much. Thank you, Rabbi, Lezak. I appreciate you both.
You're welcome. Okay, if I close with a blessing here for you.
Oh,
Mary?
yes. Thank you.
This is the blessing I offer to my daughters on Friday nights when we light our Shabbat candles. And I offer it to you on behalf of everyone on this call and the Jewish community who is supporting you and trying to bring as much light and compassion to our city as possible. I'll give you the Hebrew, then I'll translate. Yevarchech Adonai v'yishmerech. May God bless you and guard you as you walk on your way. Ya'er Adonai panav alayich v'chunech. May God's light shine onto your face and on your path and everywhere you go. Yisa Adonai panav alayich v'yasem lach shalom. In every room you walk into, may you lift up your face and may the Holy One's face meet you. And may you know a great sense of shalom, a great sense of peace and wholeness that surrounds you, not for you to keep, but actually for you to bring to every room that you walk into. We're so blessed to be in this partnership with you and wish for you great strength and clarity in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Absolutely. Stay safe.
I need that.
We got you. We got you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And it really just truly touched my heart. This is a great opportunity for me to thank Mayor London Breed again for joining us and taking the time out of her busy schedule. Thank you to my colleague, Rabbi Michael Lezak, who helped organize today's conversation along with Tina. And a special thank you to Isoke and Judy for sharing such an important personal part of their stories with us today and the incredible work that they are doing in our community. It simply blew me away. Thank you. I'm Joy Sosiski, the Chief Philanthropy Officer at the Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund. And in partnership with our co-chairs, Lily Cantor and Tina Sharkey, we are just so delighted to bring the best of the best to you for the Day of Philanthropy Festival right home to you in your own living room. Every event is focused on building resilient, impactful Jewish communities through the lens of Jewish values, kindness, love, and humor. Day of Philanthropy Festival would not be possible without the incredible support of all of our corporate sponsors, and I want to especially thank the Seligman Family Foundation and the Laura and Gary Lauder Philanthropy Venture Fund. Thank you so much. At the Federation, we're focused on making the world a better place, and the Day of Philanthropy Festival is the place to learn, to ask questions, and then to do. So you might be asking yourself, what can I do? Well, we have some ideas. In the last 3 years alone, the Federation has donated through donor advised fund giving more than $1 million to support the incredible work at Glide. You might consider opening a donor advised fund yourself if you don't already have one, to join a community of committed donors who want to make a difference here in the Bay Area and around the world. Consider making a gift to the Federation's annual fund to ensure we have strong, engaged, and resilient Jewish communities, especially during these difficult and uncertain times for so many of us. You might also consider an investment in the affordable housing investment portfolio of our Community Impact Lending Initiative to fund the creation of safe, quality, affordable housing for low-income and vulnerable communities in the Bay Area, including the San Francisco's Tenderloin. You can find more about all of these opportunities on our website at www.jewishfed.org. Thank you so much for joining us again today. We're so happy to see you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on Friday at 11 o'clock for a Zoom challah bake with our author and filmmaker Tiffany Schlain and her guest speakers, some of our favorite people, Sissy Swig, Laura Lauder, and Xander Lurie, who is winning the Lloyd Dinkelspiel Award for Young Leadership at the Federation. We can't wait to see you. Come prepared to bake challah. Until then, be safe, stay healthy, and Shabbat Shalom. See you soon.